If you ladies leave my island, if you survive recruit training, you will be a weapon. You will be a minister of death praying for war. But until that day, you are pukes. You are the lowest form of life on Earth. You're not even human fucking beings.
So I watched the new Witcher anime on Netflix. It has gorgeous animation and great action scenes, but it's in service of story that feels slightly outdated in 2021. So what is this show about? It's about the witches. The Witchers are essentially super soldiers. In the Henry Cavill version of The Witcher, we didn't really get to see their upbringing, but in this one, the Netflix anime version, it is a central part of the story. Throughout the whole movie, we see how terrible this world is. The humans just hate everyone else who's different from them, be it the indigenous elves, the witches, or even the monsters. We see the protagonist, Vesemir, who is a witcher, brought up in the Witcher program, and it is truly brutal. It is basically the familiar trope of the Spartan way, where young men are put through rigorous training, and most of them do not survive this. But the trade-off is that the program gets the best quality soldiers possible. I mean, it doesn't really make sense, but you can see it everywhere. This trope usually contains an abusive sergeant trainer as well, who in this case is an older witcher. There's everything you can imagine: starvation, abuse, terrible instructors, and even exposure to almost certain death, where only a few will survive. The actual process of making witches involves killing the kids and bring them back to life. Kind of the whole point of the movie is to show how horrifying this world is and how terrible it is to be a witcher. Your childhood is guaranteed to be one of major trauma, and everyone also hates you. You have to fight scary monsters, and even aging slowly, which seems good at first, is actually a curse. The show touches on this, with the love interest Ilyana, who is separated from Vesemir when they were kids. They reunite when they are both 70, but Vesemir still looks like he's in his 30s, while Ilyana aged normally. So from this description you might think, who in the right mind would want to be a witcher? Some of the kids in the movie even raised this point. It was only Vesemir who volunteered. To make matters worse, we even find out that witches were made to find monsters, but not only were these witches made by mages, but also the monsters that they fight. This is really dark, but basically the monsters were created to further settler colonial violence against the indigenous races of the elves and the other old races. So basically the monsters were made to commit mass genocide and make it easier for humans to steal the land. And this practice continues on. This is one of the central plot lines of the movie. Vesemir comes into a conflict over this with the older witcher. The monsters are still being created in order to provide work for the witches, again by kidnapping and experimenting on young elf girls. So it seems like everything about being a witcher is mired in violence and misery. Except it isn't. Our protagonist, Vesemir, dreams of gold, glory, and being the coolest badass ever. And that is exactly what happens. He is throwing out one-liners while fighting monsters effortlessly and looking cool in the process. The movie is shot in a way that completely undermines its own message. We are shown that being a witcher is bad, and yet it is so glorified, underpinned by the previously mentioned gorgeous animation and action scenes. They all just help make witches look super cool. If this was not enough, the old abusive witcher, who completely embraces this horrible system, dies not as everyone else in a horrible gory death, but after he kills the main villain of the movie, and this old witcher dies dignified. He's even able to utter his last words, which are very significant. He says the young kids who escaped the massacre should be witchers, better men. From what we know, this would be terrible. These innocent young kids already have so much trauma in their lives. The last thing they need is more witcher training, which, to remind you, involves torture, killing them to resurrect them, followed by a life of being discriminated against and hunting terrifying monsters. Initially, we don't know if our protagonist will take all the Witcher's words and follow up. However, we find out that he does, as the last shot of the movie involves young kid saying that his name is Geralt. What this means is that he did go through the Witcher training as he eventually becomes Henry Cavill. While this line might seem like a great continuity and Easter egg, in reality, the message being sent here is that being a Witcher is worth it, involving all the horrible stuff, and that our hero had not learned anything. He did not even listen to his dear Ilyana, who wanted to protect these kids and wanted them to have a better life. All the cycle of abuse is being repeated, and the audience is supposed to come away with the feeling of awe and being like, wow, being a Witcher is so badass! No, it isn't. It really isn't. What it is communicating extreme ideas about toxic masculinity, where boys can't show any weakness, or otherwise they literally die. Furthermore, an ideal teacher is one that abuses you, because in the end he will bring out the best in you. They have to be stoic loners until the end of their life, who nevertheless get the gold glory and women becoming badass fighters who can stand up to anybody. That is what witches represent. I'm sorry, movie, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't show how horrible it is to be a Witcher, but also show how cool and amazing being a Witcher is, and be aspirational about it. The two messages are completely paradoxical. That was my take on the recent Witcher movie. I hope you enjoyed it.